Hello everyone and welcome to the Q4 Win webinar. My name's Megan and I'll be hosting today. Hopefully you can all hear me and see the screen that I'm sharing. If you're having any issues, just type it in the chat box that you can see there on your screen. There's a control panel on the right hand side of your screen and you can minimize the panel by clicking on the orange arrow at the top. So as I mentioned, there's a chat box for you to speak to one another, to me and to the panelists. So the webinar today is being held to coincide with International Women's Day, which takes place on Sunday the 8th of March. The theme of this year's International Women's Day is a powerful one: make it happen. All around the world, International Women's Day represents an opportunity to celebrate the achievements of women while calling for greater equality. And our webinar today includes participants from several Hitachi companies across the EMEA region. So welcome everyone. Nice to see so many of you on the line. The webinar is going to start with a TED Talk, the career advice you probably didn't get, by Susan Colantuono. And Susan is the CEO of Leading Women, a management consulting firm that empowers women. She works to uncover hidden gender bias and to help managers and executives think more deeply about the role that gender plays in the workplace. Susan's TED Talk shares a simple, surprising piece of career advice you might not have heard before quite so plainly. This talk, while aimed at an audience of women, has universal takeaways for men and women, new graduates and mid-career workers. I hope you enjoy it. After the TED Talk, we're going to have a panel Q&A session with three individuals who bring a wealth of experience and skills to their roles within Hitachi. Some of you might know them, and you'll have an opportunity to ask the panelists some questions towards the end of the session. Please participate and get involved via the chat box. I'll be monitoring that, so please do ask questions and get involved. So on the panel today, I'm pleased to welcome Kate Naylor, Stuart Sadler and Lorena Della Giovanna. Kate Naylor is the HR Director at Hitachi Rail, and Kate joined Hitachi Rail in June last year. Prior to this, she worked as HR Director in a number of different industries, including retail, logistics, air traffic control, energy and food manufacturing. Kate is a mother of two, and when her children were young, she negotiated flexible working arrangements to enable her to balance her personal and professional life. Kate is passionate about developing people, and for a number of years she's been involved in initiatives to improve gender equality in the workplace. We also have Stuart Sadler, who leads the Oracle Technology Centre of Excellence in EMEA for Hitachi Consulting. And Stuart has been at Hitachi for 1 year. Prior to this, Stuart spent 5 years at dunnhumby, where he had various roles, including Senior Director for their flagship product, The Shop, forming and heading enterprise architecture, and heading global product development. Prior to this, Stuart worked for Information Resources, where he worked in multiple countries, including Italy, the UK, France and the USA, in positions of consultancy, product management, architecture, pre-sales and development. Lots of experience there. And Stuart is married to Claire. They've got 2 grown-up children, both in higher education. In his spare time, Stuart is studying for a diploma of higher education in theology. And thirdly on our panel, we've got Lorena Della Giovanna, and Lorena is the European Shared Service Manager at Hitachi Europe. She has worked for Hitachi for 25 years, and in her current role splits her time between Italy, the UK, and the rest of Europe. Lorena began working in finance and accounting, and she developed her career in a multi-business environment, which enabled her to build skills and experience working in different business areas and markets. Lorena doesn't have any children, and given the amount of travelling that she has to do, thinks she'd find it difficult to manage her work and family life. Lorena sits on the board of directors for 2 Hitachi companies. She loves a challenge and enjoys variety. Welcome everybody, it's great to hear from you. You can unmute yourselves now, panellists. So everybody will hopefully be able to hear you. We're going to have a discussion with our panellists after we've played the TED Talk. So now I'm going to play the TED Talk, the career advice you probably didn't get.
Women represent 50% of middle management and professional positions. But the percentages of women at the top of organizations represent not even a third of that number. So some people hear that statistic and they ask, why do we have so few women leaders? But I look at that statistic, and if you, like me, believe that leadership manifests at every level, you would see that there's a tremendous, awesome resource of leaders who are leading in middle management, which raises a different question. Why are there so many women mired in the middle, and what has to happen to take them to the top? So some of you might be some of those women who are in middle management and seeking to move up in your organization. Well, Tonya is a great example of one of these women. I met her 2 years ago. She was a vice president in a Fortune 50 company. And she said to me with a sense of deep frustration, I've worked really hard to improve my confidence and my assertiveness and develop a great brand. I get terrific performance evals from my boss. My 360s in the organization let me know that my teams love working for me. I've taken every management course that I can here. I'm working with a terrific mentor, and yet I've been passed over twice for advancement opportunities, even when my manager knows that I'm committed to moving up and even interested in an international assignment. I don't understand why I'm being passed over. So what Tonya doesn't realize is that there's a missing 33% of the career success equation for women, and it's understanding what this missing 33% is that's required to close the gender gap at the top. In order to move up in organizations, you have to be known for your leadership skills, and this would apply to any of you, women or men. It means that you have to be recognized for using the greatness in you to achieve and sustain extraordinary outcomes by engaging the greatness in others. Put in other language, it means you have to use your skills and talents and abilities to help the organization achieve its strategic financial goals, and do that by working effectively with others, inside of the organization and outside. And although all 3 of these elements of leadership are important, when it comes to moving up in organizations, they aren't equally important. So pay attention to the green box as I move forward. In seeking and identifying employees with high potential, the potential to go to the top of organizations, the skills and competencies that relate to that green box are rated twice as heavily as those in the other 2 elements of leadership. These skills and competencies can be summarized as business, strategic, and financial acumen. In other words, this skill set has to do with understanding where the organization is going, what its strategy is, what financial targets it has in place, and understanding your role in moving the organization forward. This is that missing 33% of the career success equation for women. Not because it's missing in our capabilities or abilities, but because it's missing in the advice that we're given. Here's what I mean by that. 5 years ago, I was asked to moderate a panel of executives, and the topic for the evening was, what do you look for in high potential employees? So think about the 3 elements of leadership as I summarize for you what they told me. They said, we look for people who are smart and hardworking and committed and trustworthy and resilient. So which element of leadership does that relate to? Personal greatness. They said, we look for employees who are great with our customers, who empower their teams, who negotiate effectively, who are able to manage conflict well, and are overall great communicators. Which element of leadership does that equate to? Engaging the greatness in others. And then they pretty much stopped. So I asked, well, what about people who understand your business, where it's going, and their role in taking it there? And what about people who are able to scan the external environment, identify risks and opportunities, make strategy or make strategic recommendations? And what about people who are able to look at the financials of your business, understand the story that the financials tell, and either take appropriate action or make appropriate recommendations? And to a man, they said, that's a given. So I turned to the audience of 150 women and I asked, how many of you have ever been told that the door opener for career advancement is your business, strategic, and financial acumen, and that all the other important stuff is what differentiates you in the talent pool? 3 women raised their hand. And I've asked this question of women all around the globe in the 5 years since, and the percentage is never much different. So this is obvious, right? But how can it be? Well, there are primarily 3 reasons that there's this missing 33% in the career success advice given to women. When organizations direct women toward resources that focus on the conventional advice that we've been hearing for over 40 years, there's a notable absence of advice that relates to business, strategic, and financial acumen. Much of the advice is emphasizing personal actions that we need to take, like become more assertive, become more confident, develop your personal brand, things that Tonya has been working on. And advice about working with other people, things like learn to self-promote, get a mentor, enhance your network. And virtually nothing said about the importance of business, strategic, and financial acumen. This doesn't mean that this advice is unimportant. What it means is that this is advice that's absolutely essential for breaking through from career start to middle management. But it's not the advice that gets women to break through from the middle, where we're 50%, to senior and executive positions. And this is why conventional advice to women in 40 years hasn't closed the gender gap at the top and won't close it. Now, the second reason relates to Tonya's comments about having had excellent performance evals, great feedback from her teams, and having taken every management training program she can lay her hands on. So you would think that she's getting messages from her organization through the talent development systems and performance management systems that let her know how important it is to develop business, strategic, and financial acumen. But here again, that green square is quite small. On average, talent and performance management systems in the organizations that I've worked with focus 3-to-1 on the other 2 elements of leadership compared to the importance of business, strategic, and financial acumen, which is why typical talent and performance systems haven't closed and won't close the gender gap at the top. Now, Tonya also talked about working with a mentor. And this is really important to talk about, because if organizations' talent and performance systems aren't giving people in general information about the importance of business, strategic, and financial acumen, how are men getting to the top? Well, there are primarily two ways. One is because of the positions they're guided into, and the other is because of informal mentoring and sponsorship. So what's women's experience as it relates to mentoring? Well, this comment from an executive that I worked with recently illustrates that experience. He was very proud of the fact that last year he had two protégés, a man and a woman. And he said, I helped the woman build confidence, I helped the man learn the business, and I didn't realize that I was treating them any differently. And he was sincere about that. So what this illustrates is that as managers, whether we're women or men, we have mindsets about women and men, about careers and leadership. And these unexamined mindsets won't close the gender gap at the top. So how do we take this idea of the missing 33% and turn it into action? Well, for women, the answer is obvious. We have to begin to focus more on developing and demonstrating the skills we have that show that we're people who understand our businesses, where they're headed, and our role in taking it there. That's what enables that breakthrough from middle management to leadership at the top. But you don't have to be a middle manager to do this. One young scientist that works in a biotech firm used her insight about the missing 33% to weave financial impact data into a project update she did, and got tremendous positive feedback from the managers in the room. So we don't want to put 100% of the responsibility on women's shoulders, nor would it be wise to do so, and here's why. In order for companies to achieve their strategic financial goals, executives understand that they have to have everyone pulling in the same direction. In other words, the term we use in business is we have to have strategic alignment. And executives know this very well, and yet only 37%, according to a recent conference board report, believe that they have that strategic alignment in place. So for 63% of organizations, achieving their strategic financial goals is questionable. And if you think about what I've just shared, that you have situations where at least 50% of your middle managers haven't received clear messaging that they have to become focused on the business, where it's headed, and their role in taking it there, it's not surprising that that percentage of executives who are confident about alignment is so low. Which is why there are other people who have a role to play in this. It's important for directors on boards to expect from their executives proportional pools of women when they sit down once a year for their succession discussions. Why? Because if they aren't seeing that, it could be a red flag that their organization isn't as aligned as it could potentially be. It's important for CEOs to also expect these proportional pools. And if they hear comments like, well, she doesn't have enough business experience, ask the question, what are we going to do about that? It's important for HR executives to make sure that the missing 33% is appropriately emphasized. And it's important for women and men who are in management positions to examine the mindsets we hold about women and men, about careers and success, to make sure we're creating a level playing field for everybody. So let me close with the latest chapter in Tanya's story. Tanya emailed me 2 months ago, and she said that she had been interviewed for a new position, and during the interview they probed about her business acumen and her strategic insights into the industry. And she said that she was so happy to report that now she has a new position reporting directly to the Chief Information Officer at her company. So for some of you, the missing 33% is an idea for you to put into action. And I hope that for all of you, you will see it as an idea worth spreading in order to help organizations be more effective, to help women create careers that soar, and to help close the gender gap at the top. Thank you.
start with you, Kate. And firstly, I'd like to hear your thoughts on Susan's TED Talk. So she talked there about the middle manager mire. Do you observe that middle manager mire that Susan mentioned? So that's women without the sufficient business, strategic or financial acumen. And really just want to get your thoughts on whether you think the missing 33% that Susan mentioned is a key factor to why there is a disproportionate percentage of women in leadership. And if Kate's not there, we'll start with Stuart, please.
Hi there. Yes, I had the privilege of working for 4 different companies that some have formed in different ways. 2 of them were companies which had been around for a long time, and therefore I recognized, a low percentage of women in the most senior roles. The other company, which was dunnhumby, was a really interesting company because it was set up right from the start by a husband and wife, Edwina Dunn and Clive Humby. And in that context, Edwina was the business brains behind the start of the company, and Clive was sort of the scientist, the data scientist. And the company started with that ethos of I think, playing to all 3 of those thirds that Susan talked about, and emphasized people to come up. So I think it's easier maybe when a company has been formed where there are already women in senior roles. And so, maybe what Susan's talking about is the difficulty when you've got an established board of directors that are all male, or pretty much all male, and how to penetrate that. I don't know what you think, Kate.
Thank you, Stuart.
Is Kate on the line?
Kate's actually having a couple of difficulties at the moment, so she's not able to hear us. But Lorena should be on the line. Lorena, are you there? Lorena is also struggling with her phone audio connection. So Stuart, it's just you for now. So.
There's a slight irony here, isn't there?
There is.
I do apologise, everybody.
Sorry about that. So, Stuart, what are some, in your opinion, what are some practical ways that women can go about closing the 33% gap?
Sure. I do think that one of the things that I'm sort of very conscious of at the moment is that that none of us are actually objective in what we do. We may think that we're objective and everybody else is subjective. So the first thing is to sort of recognize where you come to a particular decision or a particular situation or a particular conversation, what background you bring. And Susan pointed that out in terms of that example of where there was a male mentor who had a female mentee and a male mentee, and he was very conscious that he hadn't thought about strategic acumen with the female mentee. So what was happening in him to make that happen? So I think we should be very conscious of the baggage, the background, the experience we come from. So and actually use that to our strength. Where Edwina, who was Edwina Dunn, the example I gave, the example that she gave was she was superb at looking for the greatness in others and rising them up, much better than I've ever seen male executives. And therefore it would be wrong to lose, to accentuate the third that Susan is referencing, that some women and also some men, to be honest, are also missing, but without losing the other two components. I don't think, there needs to be a balance between all three of those.
Yeah.
Now, and we shouldn't forget that. So, and the perfect form is all of those. Recognize your own skills and weaknesses, recognize the skills in others, and nurture those people, both men and women, who we have the privilege to look after, and then also to make sure that in our thinking we're not just thinking as soon as possible in our careers. I think we should be thinking wider than what we're being asked to do. Recognize the context by which the work that we're doing sits. So how does my piece of work contribute to the whole company, and start to think more whole Hitachi Consulting or Hitachi Rail or wherever we are. What's the context of my work and how does it fit in? And start to, they talk about, when we have promotion conversations, the biggest sort of plus of somebody should be promoted is when somebody in the room says, surely they're that senior level already. Start to already think in that sort of bigger picture, and consciously do that. So I think it's all about us being conscious about what we bring, what we want as well. I think we've got somebody else on the line, otherwise I'm having a dialogue on my own.
No, thank you, Stuart. That's great. Yeah, we've got Lorena on the line now. Lorena, do you have some practical ways that women can go about closing the gap and sort of following from what Stuart said there?
Well, it's from my point of view, surely you need both working on the field, and I have been working for a very male-oriented company for so many years, and also I was born in a very male cultural country, because Italy is still a very male-oriented from business point of view. And I think that you need both training, but you should propose yourself, because in most organizations, I agree with Susan, all the trainings or the advice you get is just related to how to be more assertive, how you can negotiate for yourself, and so on. But on the other hand, working on the field together with men, you can absorb these sense of business much better, and you can improve by yourself those skills. So in my case, I have requested to do training on purpose just on strategic and business, rather than just on leadership or, the typical women training, because I have been working with so many men for many, many years, and that's what I felt on a daily job. So my main advice to the women is to try to take the best when they work in a very male environment, to take the best in working with men, which doesn't mean copy them, but just understand why they are going to the top. However, you have always to think about the environment where you work with. So I think that in Hitachi, even if you have that business skills and strategic skills, and that you can demonstrate that you have always to take into consideration that it's a very male-oriented company. And most of the time you go to the top just because you are not a man. And a woman to go to the top has to put a lot of effort and a lot of sacrifice, and sacrifice the personal life to achieve a top position. So it also depends on the environment where you work with. Things are changing, but I think that still there is a lot to do to go there.
Yeah, there is a long way to go. You're right, but there's definitely some practical things that I think women can do. As you mentioned, you're going through the training right now, and you've been with Hitachi for a very long time, and so would you say you've seen seen the environment change in the 25 years you've been with Hitachi?
Not really.
No.
Not really. Not really. If you know, I'm attending a lot of executive meetings, and most of the time I'm the only woman. You can see me within 70 men, most of the time. And if you look into Hitachi Europe organizations, the director's role are just men. Just men. And you don't understand why. Surely there is these difficulties in showing these business capabilities. But on the other hand is really the culture. It's a Japanese company in industrial business, so it's not easy. I'm not seeing many changes, I have to say. So we talk a lot about diversity. We're trying to do the best in terms of giving same opportunity, but I think that now is just really talking. And my main recommendation is that the organization should forget about the word equal, but it should just position the right people in the right place based on the characteristics of the people, but not based on, how can I say, the cultural stereotype. And that's sometimes what's happened. So HR should have women and finance should have men, or, you know, the top of a business as engineering should be a man. This is not the way to move on. You should do a proper assessment of the people, deeply assessment of the people.
Thanks, Lorena. Yes, yeah, I agree. So sort of based on skills and experience rather than other factors. And,
yeah, I agree with that, and I think that, you know, the best person for the job should get the job, whatever job that be. But I did like Susan's point, a bit like when we are, you know, doing GARM ratings, that we compare that with a bell shape to make sure, you know, to act as our measurement. I think we should, I'd like to point that we should consciously look and say, why are there no women applying for this role? You know, how are we developing as a company? We're missing out on 50% of the great executives. So why are we missing out on those great candidates who are not applying for these roles? Now, maybe, you know, I've only been with Hitachi a year, so and I think partially Hitachi Consulting is because of the American influences, maybe slightly more open than some of the more industrialized Japanese direct contact. And
yeah.
I just think that's history, really. So maybe we're a little bit spoiled in Hitachi Consulting, but I'm sure we've got a huge distance to go as well, because we are missing out on talent. And companies that engage correctly with all groups of people, you know, and it's not just gender, you know, it is, you know, people who want to work part-time and full-time as well, which obviously is a key issue for many women at certain times during, you know, during family life, but is growingly becoming an issue for men too. How do we make sure that we can engage well with people who want to work differently, but also have a huge contribution to make? And if we can't adjust to those situations, we will be losing out as a company, and somebody else will gain, and somebody else will move away from us. So it's a real business. It's not altruistic to make sure that we succeed in growing the potential that women bring. It should be completely a business advantage if we can tap into resources from different groups of people who should be great employees and executives.
Certainly, that's right. And as you mentioned there, some of the Hitachi Group companies that you know, might be more sort of have a different makeup to others, and I think that very much depends on the leadership that's within those companies. yes, I agree. It really is essential and makes perfect business sense for us as a company to modernise in line with society and the different needs that women and men have. Hopefully we've got Kate now who should have joined us. Kate, are you there?
Yes, I am, and I've had dreadful technical problems, so I do apologise, everybody.
Hi, Kate. No problem.
Hiya.
Kate's from Hitachi Rail. Not sure if you picked up on much of what Lorena and Stuart were chatting about there, Kate, but I'd really like to hear your thoughts on Susan's TED Talk as well.
Okay, I did agree with it, actually. I mean, I do think that women tend to, and these are sweeping generalisations, and I am an HR person, but they're less inclined to speak in business terms, in terms of payback, return on capital employed, and so on, and less inclined to quantify. And I wonder sometimes if it's linked to the other sweeping generalisation that a lot of females like to be expert in their field, and sometimes to actually express yourselves in more general business terms, perhaps you're going somewhere where you feel on less solid ground. So I do actually see less business focus, perhaps more functional focus, more expertise, but less general business focus from a lot of female interventions in the workplace.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you.
Why do you think that is, Kate? Why do you think women have more of a focus on what they can do and men maybe are more generic?
I think it fits with another couple of things that I think are more prevalent in women than they are in men, and women try to be great at everything. Again, sweeping statement, I know, but you know, I'd like to be a great mum, a great wife, a great whatever I am at work. And actually, you have to content yourself with being, well, I always say 80% at everything, but frankly, you can't. That doesn't add up either. So, you know, you're not going to do it as well as you like. You can't be as good at any of those things as you really want to be. And actually, if you start talking about areas of business that aren't your area of specialism, it's more likely that you're going to perhaps show your ignorance. And I do see women quite concerned about doing that. And that may be why they don't go there, why they don't ask lots of questions which actually reveal their lack of knowledge in an area.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear your experience there, Kate. And is that how do you agree, Stuart?
Yes, certainly. You know, I think men can be more myopic at the task in hand. You know, again, it's a classic stereotype of women being very much better at multiprocessing and men being more focused on, you know, killing the saber-toothed tiger or whatever the model is. But I hope, you know, that any stereotype is there to be knocked down. You know, I think whatever we need to do to get what we want out of work and what we want out of life, I think first of all it's about knowing what we want, you know, and then you know, it's hard to go against your psyche, but you know, I know that Claire, my wife, is superb at handling multiple things, and you know, in danger of damning all men. I'm very good at forgetting things when I'm focusing on one other thing. So, you know, there's those things, and I know deliberately that I have to get around that by lists and prompts and the rest of it to manage my own multi-processing, which doesn't come naturally to me as a man. I'm on very shaky ground here. So.
I know. There are certainly, I think, things that men are perhaps, you know, known for being good at, and things that women are known for being good at, and there are differences. And I think really we should celebrate those differences, and that's all what International Women's Day is about, really, and sort of celebrating that diversity, but also recognising it. And I really think that Susan's TED Talk, for me anyway, it certainly brought something to my mind that I hadn't thought about.
Same here.
Yeah,
I think so too. And actually, when I talked to you, Megan, earlier about a women's development program I used to run a very long time ago in British Gas, actually I recall that we used to encourage business conversations. We used to invite male directors to come and speak to female groups, and it wasn't about being female or anything like that. It was purely a business conversation, and it clearly was a surprise to the men, the directors, that they could have that type of a conversation with women, and it clearly wasn't something that they were used to happening. So I actually think I hadn't thought about it before now, but it is something that we perhaps should focus on more, rather than assertiveness training and all of those things that traditionally we talk about with trying to encourage women in the first place. It's actually, well, maybe you should go and learn your way around the report and accounts. Maybe you should go off and do yourself a certificate in company directorship or something like that to give you a broad business view so that you feel more confident to ask questions across the whole business.
Yeah, Kate, I think that your idea is great, and I think is the quickest way to move forward rather than a simple training. Because as I was saying before, this is really the experience on the field and working with men and women that can give you the chance to show to the man that you have these capabilities, and the organization can come across of that. So I think that this kind of meeting or conference can be really, really useful.
I think it can too, and I think the more you can broaden your own experience in working on projects, in finding ways to work with other functions, in particular where you're trying to pull together business cases and you have to get into the finances, very useful experience rather than looking to acquire necessarily more experience within your functional area of expertise.
We've got an interesting question on the chat box actually from one of our audience who asks, how do we get our executives to even consider taking action on this and raising this issue within our organisations? Do you have views on how we could go about that? I'll start with you, Kate.
Okay. I think it's a danger if it's a female issue. I think that it's more a case of getting women perhaps to contribute more broadly than in their pure functional area, which if I look across, and it may be just rail and organisations I've been in, but there are very many more women in legal, finance, HR, areas where they can be experts but in a fairly narrow field. And I think, actually encouraging them to get more broad experience then brings them to attention more of executives. Having a good talent review process is great, but actually the broader the person can be, the more they can make their own business case really for promotion.
So really just gaining experience in different business areas and learning about the business through that.
I mean, it can be done another way. So finding a good mentor, sponsor to go and ask about the business more generally is a very good step forward. So, please explain to me, please walk me through the report and accounts, please, or talk me through business risk, or whatever it might be. If you can find someone to develop a broader view of the business, I think that's only helpful.
And Stuart, then, the other part of this question is how do we raise this within our organisation? So do you have any thoughts on what organisations can do to give equal opportunities to both men and women for them to learn and get the experience that they need to really rise within that company?
So I think there's two separate points there. One is that how do we encourage our senior people, mostly men, to to see this as a worthwhile endeavour and a practical and practical ways of growing the talent that isn't bubbling up to the top. And then secondly, how as individuals, if we want to get further up, and if we're mostly if we're talking about women, how do we do that? And I think we touched on mentors, and I think a lot of the men that move above middle management probably have had a sponsor or a help at some point in terms of mostly informal relationships with more senior men. I've been fortunate enough to have a few mentors and be a few mentors for people in my career, and I've actually had a female mentor and I've had a female mentee, and I think that really helps when you have cross-gender mentee and mentors. So for somebody to look out to grow those relationships and gain, ask those questions about why is it that we're doing this? How was this decision made? What did we contemplate to make that business decision to acquire that company, or to start just thinking the bigger pictures and asking those questions. Nobody minds those sort of questions, and I think our point before about some people may think they sound dumb by asking those questions. I don't think that's the case. I think that's a very obvious and open thing to make, and I think you'll be surprised at how many people won't be able to answer the question, but together you'll be able to work that out. So I think finding a mentor is important. I think on the first question about how do we get exec to notice, I think this is both on very real terms. What are the capabilities and the potential that we're missing out of? So I think it would be good if our boards were more on this sort of meeting, and this meeting stopped. Became more of a how do we grow potential that we're missing out on, and obviously this is a huge community of people that I've certainly loved working for women and have women working for me. So and why would we want to miss out on that opportunity? It's a real business opportunity.
Yeah, I think it does make business sense, and it's really about, as you said, Kate, as well, just putting the business case together as to why, why we should be giving women opportunities within the organisation and supporting women's decisions to move up within the organisation. And Lorena, I know that obviously you've been with Hitachi for 25 years, and you were talking earlier about some of the things that you've observed in that time. And one question we've got here from a member of our audience, and I think this will probably be our last one because we'll be wrapping up shortly, but in your experience, Lorena, do you have sort of views on how we can attract more women to come and work for Hitachi, or specifically in your case Hitachi Europe, and the different industries that we operate in? Do you have views on that?
It's a quite challenging question because really the only way is to go back to Hitachi Europe and they have to demonstrate on practical level that women can be on head position. For example, appointing a woman as director. That's never happened. Never.
You're
so if you do that,
board of directors.
Maybe you.
Sorry to butt in. I mean, you're on the board of directors for 2 Hitachi companies, aren't you?
Yes, which is quite unusual, but I am one. I am in the board, so I am the first one. In the same way, I am one of the first in Hitachi Europe who are attending executive committee or executive meeting. But still, if you look at the general manager role or function director's role, I'm talking about HR or F&A directors, they are just men. So women are just managers. So it's really to do the step up. If you are part of an executive committee, just giving the title as well is a kind of showing that the company is really changing. And having more women in the executive committee, maybe women on top of the business as well. Hitachi is an industrial company, but that doesn't mean that a woman can't manage a business. We have so many women engineers. So it's really showing through the organization that there are women in head positions.
Yeah.
I think it's very important to profile the women there are, because there's no doubt that if we portray ourselves as an organisation that has got women in, albeit not many, in senior roles, it attracts more women. You know, it's very, very off-putting to have a picture on a careers website that's, you know, the board are all men in a certain age range and all those things. So there's no doubt that, I mean, we are doing loads of recruiting where I am in Hitachi Rail, and actually almost the more women we recruit, the more women want to join. You know, it's quite unattractive to join a business that seems to be virtually all men. So, you know, it depends where you are in that cycle, really, in your business.
I agree. I think the biggest way to attract women to join a company is for the leadership team to have some women on it, so that women that may want to go and work for that company feel that they will have opportunities within the company to progress and develop their own careers.
Yeah. I mean, my company's been growing rapidly, and we only really just set up our first sort of broader executive, and just the fact that I'm on it changes the complexion of it quite considerably. Rail and engineering, you know, is very, very traditionally male, and certainly even when I arrived in June, there were virtually no women in Holborn. Now there are more, and there's one on the executive, and I have no doubt that that's attracting more to join.
Good. Yeah, it does all seem to be going in the right direction. I think we all agree it might take some time, but it sounds from what you've been saying that things are going in the right direction. We're having a really good discussion here. We've got lots of questions from our audience, but it has just gone 1 o'clock, so I'm going to wrap up now. I've got all of those questions from the audience, and I will put those to the panelists and try to get some views on that for you. And I do again apologise for the slight technical issue we had with the video earlier, but you all heard it, and that's the main thing. We have recorded the session, so I'll edit the recording to get rid of the technical difficulties, and hopefully that will run a bit smoother, so you'll be able to watch it if you want to again. And if you would like to learn more about WIN, the Women's Interactive Network, please do get in touch with your WIN rep at your group company, or with me. I'm Megan Undrell, and I do look forward to seeing you all again on the next webinar. And have a great International Women's Day, everyone, this Sunday. I hope you're all celebrating with family and friends. And thanks again to our panellists who did a fantastic job. Really appreciate hearing your views and your experience there.
My pleasure.
Yep,
A pleasure.
mine too.
Thank
Absolutely.
you. All right, guys. Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Have a
you.
great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.